Listen up, people. Pumpkin spices hit the shelves. I'm once again considering getting into football. There's a whimsical little whisper in the air telling me to crack open a nice cold over the garden wall Buffy the Vampire Slayer binge sesh, which can only mean one thing. It's Shadowfell Fall. I recently designed this cheeky little one-shot, either as obviously a one-off game, as an introduction to the Shadowfell if you're looking for a way to drop your players into that realm, or as a story you could just run there in the first place. In this video, I'll run you through the story's main drama and its different notable locations, ending with an oh-so-spooky Shadowfell portal. A creaking sign depicts an arched whale spraying crudely carved droplets, above which read the words, "The Spouter Inn." Through the fogged and cracked windows, the flicker of candles promises warmth to sailors seeking shelter from the fog-shrouded world. Inside, the bowed walls resemble an old abandoned craft, dark and faded paintings on the walls whispering of past storms and angered leviathans. A fire pops in the hearth, and the day's catch steams out from a galley behind the bar top. The inn appears as empty as the docks, just a stone's throw away. The innkeeper Dorian welcomes travelers warmly, hoping their good spirits will lend to the purchasing of his stronger spirits. Townsfolk occasionally meander in to have a pint with friends or to leave a request on the job board behind the counter. The job requests include an opening for a new lighthouse keeper, payment unlisted, an unspecified request for adventurers, which pays 30 gold, and a deck swap request for an elderly woman, which pays 2 gold. This tale revolves around the story of one woman, a Swan May whose feathers were stolen 2 decades prior to the party's current arrival in the town of Salt Point Dale, otherwise just referred to as Salt Point. If you don't know what a Swan May is, I do have a video talking in more detail about their history and folklore, but they are essentially lycanthropic swan women who take off and put on their swan's skin/feathers in order to transform. As a young woman 20 years ago, the Swan May Amara bathed in a mountain lake with her sisters, their feathers draped in the trees nearby. A lonely traveler came across the scene and, enamored with their beauty, stole a set of the feathers and waited in the rocks nearby. While each of her sisters gathered their own, transformed back into swans, and flew away, Amara's feathers were nowhere to be found. Once the sisters had all taken off, Joseph Havelock revealed himself as the feathers' thief, but didn't reveal their location. Amara demanded them be returned, but he refused. Unable to harm him and risk never seeing the precious feathers again, Amara found herself at the mercy of Havelock, an ever-cruel and selfish man. He demanded her hand in marriage. Rather than part forever with her life's joy, she married her life's bane, from then on never ceasing in her search for the feathers and her freedom. And yes, this story is ripped straight from folklore. What can I say? It's classic. Havelock had recently become the new governor of Salt Point, so he brought her back there to the family home. A few years later, they had one child together, a daughter they called Pearl. I do have a side story for Pearl, and a fun little twist ending, and a dungeon creation system for the adventure's final location. For this video, though, I'm just sharing the main storyline and locations, which you can add to and adjust however you see fit. But if you want all the details I wrote, you can find them on my Patreon, including a brainstorming video I made when I was still working the story out. I'm actually starting a video series for patrons or YouTube members where you can send me your own adventure or world-building ideas for me to brainstorm in a similar fashion. Lately, Amara has taken to dressing as a ghost and turning off the flame of the lighthouse when incoming ships seek the safety of the harbor. Having lost all hope of finding her feathers, she wrecks these ships as an act of revenge against mankind, hoping it will ruin the life of her husband in particular, who relies on trade to maintain his lavish lifestyle above the village. Because of her, 3 ships have wrecked in the last month. Should the party investigate the lighthouse and follow the clues that point to Amara's involvement, they may choose to help her. If they do, they can search Havelock's manor to find a map for a local cave system in which he has stuffed and hung the feathers. They can also get there by searching around the shipwrecks, which have in part washed into the caves through hidden cliffside entrances facing the sea. This cave system resides directly below the lighthouse and has recently become home to the Kuo-toa. Amara's pain and her acts of treachery in the lighthouse have opened up a portal from the Shadowfell, out of which the creatures recently arrived and began their worship of the strange form upon the wall. Having just discovered their newest god, the Kuo-toa will not part with the taxidermied feathers willingly. By the way, any of the monsters used in this story come from the 2014 Monster Manual or Basic Rules, including the Kuo-toa. If you're unfamiliar with them, they are cult-like creatures that are technically supposed to be stuck in the Shadowfell, despite my deciding to move them out of it for this story. But fake god worshipping is kind of their whole shtick. Kuo-toa worship gods of their own creation, but if enough Kuo-toa believe that a god is real, the energy of their collective subconscious can cause that god to manifest as a physical entity. The form a Kuo-toa god takes depends on the inspiration for its divine image and is usually random or nonsensical. If you wanted to, you could make it so that the feathers have already turned into a god. A party with a heart will pick up the job board request to scrub an elderly woman's deck. If they do, the woman is happy to stand outside with them as they work and chat with them. She shares with them the story of the night she saw a ghost on its way to the lighthouse and her theory that a living human has turned it off and caused the wrecks. She isn't sure who in Salt Point would commit such treachery, but the ghost finery suggested a wealthy woman behind the curtain. There's also the Lighthouse Keeper Wanted quest, or the Adventurers Needed quest, which will both lead the party to Havelock's Manor, since he's the one who posted those jobs. He needs a new lighthouse keeper, since the last one died of a heart attack during the third shipwreck, and he also needs adventurers to figure out why the lighthouse keeps failing, and, if possible, to stop that from happening again. Havelock has filled this manor to the brim with taxidermied creatures he hunted earlier in his life. A large number of them are various birds, some entirely foreign to the region in which he now resides. A walled garden in the back of the manor contains numerous water features, including a small natural waterfall pouring off the mountainside and into a pool. Surrounding the pool are statues of naked women transforming into different coastal animals. One steps out of a seal skin, another holds a seagull's beak to her face, while another removes the heavy pelt of a swan from her back. If the party investigates the house, the only point of interest beside the garden is Havelock's study. His desk contains a secret compartment that hides a detailed map of the local cave system. The map also reveals the overland entrance that allows for much safer passage into and out of the caves than does the seaside entrance below the lighthouse. The party might also investigate the lighthouse itself, which, while it has not been abandoned long, already has thick dust settling over its wooden floorboards. And while Amara may not be a real ghost, one does reside in the rooms above. Hurley, the previous lighthouse keeper, haunts the beacon now, determined to protect its light from anyone who would wish to snuff it out. Hurley cannot rest until Amara's actions are uncovered and stopped, or until a reliable lighthouse keeper can protect the beacon from her hand. He never saw her face, so he can't tell the adventurers who frightened him to death and destroyed so many ships, but he can share that the ghost is definitely a human woman. Unfortunately, her being human was only apparent to Hurley once his heart gave out, and he became the first and only ghost in the lighthouse. Guilt weighs heavily upon Hurley, and indeed, the ghosts of the fallen sailors call up to him on stormy nights, echoing up from the caves below. If he shares this hint with the party, they may not search the manor at all, electing instead to find the caves themselves if the detail sounds intriguing enough. Whichever route they pursue, your adventurers will eventually find themselves in the caves below the lighthouse. The number of spaces/rooms there, as well as the number of enemies present, will depend on your party's level and experience. If you look up the Kuo-toa, there's additional and more dangerous versions of those creatures called monitors and archpriests. I also thought it would be fun to have some ghosts of sailors present, whether they're aggressive towards the party, neutral towards them, or potentially sullen allies. One of the backmost caves will contain the swanmay feathers. On the far wall in this space hangs a large taxidermied swan. Its feathers shimmer with dew from the nearby waves. It looks as though it could come to life and fly away at any moment. If given her feathers, Amara will immediately don them and fly off. If you're playing this as a one-shot, the story, in theory, ends there. Your adventurers can decide if they want to overthrow Havelock for being a corrupt and evil governor, or just leave him be. But if you want to include it, the party can also find a portal to the Shadowfell in one of the cave rooms directly below the lighthouse. A churning mist fills the center of this cave. The surrounding silence drowns out the distant crashing waves as tendrils of mist claw outward. They whisper unintelligible secrets into the air, beckoning closer anyone who might be listening. So what do you think? Do you like it? Does it sound like something you'd want to run? And if so, what changes would you make / what details would you like to add? And if you do end up running it, come back later. Let me know how it went. Thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all have a great whatever it is, and I will see you next time.